So good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I'm Tony, account manager here at Eureka Solutions, and many of you on the webinar I already know as your account manager. Today, I'm delighted to introduce you to a company who are making waves in automating and streamlining the time-consuming process of accounts payable. I'm delighted to introduce you this morning to Jurian van Maanen, who's the Vice President of Sales at EMEA at ZoneCo. Before we start, though, just a couple of pieces of housekeeping. The webinar will be recorded and available to you so that you can share with your colleagues. Please feel free to ask any questions using the live chat button in the bottom right-hand of the slide. There will be time at the end of the presentations for questions and answers, so we can sort that out. So without further delay, I'll hand you over to Jurian. Thank you.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you, Tony, for that introduction. And thank you to the team at Eureka for giving me the opportunity to do this presentation today. I'll be talking about the ZoneApps and a background to native SuiteApps and why we believe in the power of those native SuiteApps application. And this is what I'll go through today. So a little bit of a background of myself. As Tony mentioned, my name is Jurian van Maanen. I'm the VP of Sales for the EMEA region. I've been working in the NetSuite ecosphere for quite some time, since 2009, in a variety of different roles, including implementing NetSuite and now focusing on selling those Suite apps. I'll give you a bit of an introduction to the company and what I mean with native Suite apps, and then we'll zoom in on two of them. So we'll look at ZoneCapture and ZoneApproval. I'll give you a little bit of a background, and then we'll do a live product demo. At the end of the demo, we'll do a Q&A, so feel free, like any questions you might have, put them in the chat, and at the end I'll make sure that I'll go over any of the questions that came up. Let's start with a bit of an introduction on the company, Zone&Co. Zone&Co was founded in 2013 by two co-founders that worked at a very large NetSuite user in the software industry. And they got to know the system really well. They thought, let's use that knowledge to help other software companies using NetSuite as well. And they started implementation services and realized quite early on that they ended up customizing the system from time to time. And those customizations were mainly around the billing processes of the companies they were working for. And they figured, hey, there must be an easier or a better way to do that than to reinvent the wheels every single time. And they became a NetSuite SDN partner. So SDN stands for the Suite Cloud Developer Network. And it's a partner type that allows you to build applications for NetSuite. And they did. So in 2018, they launched Zone Billing. And Zone Billing was sort of the standard productation of those customizations they built before on those billing processes. They grew really rapidly after launching that Suite app. And in 2021, they received an investment from a VC company called Insight Partners. And one of the goals they had with that investment, or two of the goals they had, was to enhance their product portfolio, so to make sure that they could offer more applications to their customers, and also to build out their international presence, because until then it had been quite US focused. And one of the key things they did is they acquired a company called Fast4, which might be a name familiar to some of you. I also originally come from the Fast4 side of the business. Was also an SDN partner, really focused on the EMEA market with a team of 70 people in the EMEA market and a library of different NetSuite applications. Those applications all became part of that Zone family, were rebranded into ZoneApps. And in the course of 2022, another company was acquired called Satori, who developed a Suite app for integrating NetSuite with Microsoft Power BI. This is the mission statement of Zone&Co. So if you look at us as a company, we have now over 200 people. Pretty much all of them have a financial background, are accountants. Virtually all of them have extensive NetSuite experience. And really our mission in life is to make the life of financial users in NetSuite easier. And we do that by building what we call native SuiteApps applications. So what are native SuiteApps applications? I think like pretty much everyone using NetSuite will have seen this wheel, either during sales or after. It shows all the different elements that NetSuite can do, right? Very broad systems, so inventory management, financials. And one of those is, you see that little pie there, built for NetSuite. So it's the Suite Cloud platform that supports NetSuite. And on top of that platform, you can build additional functionality using the tools that NetSuite offers. And that's what we call a native Suite app, So additional functionality that's built on top of NetSuite that you can productize and basically install as an app into any NetSuite account. And there's a particular reason why we really like that, because if you want to enhance NetSuite with further functionality, you could you could buy a separate system, you could integrate it. There's multiple ways to do it. But what we really like about using native application is the fact that for an end user, it really looks and feels exactly the way as NetSuite. You almost don't know where NetSuite ends and where that SuiteApp starts. That's one of the benefits. I tried to, like when I first created this slide, I think I had around 10 different things why I think native SuiteApps are extremely powerful. Marketing didn't like that, so I narrowed it down to 4, but these are really 4 big benefits of using a native application. It's all in one. So like NetSuite users tend to really like it. They go for this vision of the suite, having lots of functionality in one platform. Those native SuiteApps really play into that. So you don't need to learn a new system, remember a different password. You don't have to deal with integrations. It's all part of your NetSuite environment. It's efficient because you utilize a lot of the setup that you already have in your ERP. So we're going to look at an AP automation tool and think about all the things that you need to process your AP transactions, right? You need to have vendors, you need to have GL accounts, you need to have classifications. If you have a separate system, you need to reinvent that wheel, set all of that up. With a native app, you utilize already what's there in NetSuite, meaning it's really efficient and fast. You can install it as a bundle. It's a matter of weeks and you're up and running. It's secure because we don't have our own infrastructure. Everything is based on the incredible infrastructure that NetSuite offers. And it's unified. And what I mean there is that everything that you do with our apps is stored in the NetSuite database, and it can utilize the NetSuite functionality. So booking recommendations you create with ZoneCapture, you can use NetSuite reminders to show them. You can use save searches to all those great tools that NetSuite offers. You can also use, because our database are fully built on top of those NetSuite databases and capabilities. So because we like that concept so much, we ended up building quite a library of applications. I'll focus today on ZoneCapture and ZoneApprovals, just so that you've also seen or heard of some of the other. So Zone Billing I referred to earlier, our application that can make NetSuite handle virtually any type of billing process that you might run into, especially focusing also on things like usage-based billing. ZoneReconcile automates the processing of bank statement reports. ZonePayments connects with electronic payment providers. That starts with Stripe, so it acts as a Stripe integration. And ZoneReporting comes from the Satori part of the business, what I refer to. So an application to integrate with Power BI. Now, on all of these apps, we do regular webinars. We have lots of materials on our website. So if any of that sounds like something that might be helpful for your business, don't hesitate to reach out or check our website for further details. What's also nice about our applications is we've designed them to work together, so they complement each other. So if you use Zone Payment and Zone Billing, for example, then the payment links that Zone Payments generate are also integrated on the subscription records on Zone Billing. Or if you use Zone Reconcile and ZoneApproval, you can have a setting in ZoneApprovals where if you create a transaction from Zone Reconcile, it's automatically approved. So we design them to have synergy together, and the more you use, the more optimized your NetSuite experience becomes. And I think ZoneCapture and ZoneApproval are a great example of that, because where the one ends, the other starts, and there are specific features designed to make them work together. And that's why today in the webinar, I thought it's nice to really go over both and show you that interaction between the two in action. So what are those two applications? Let me very briefly introduce it. I know that the live demos are always the most interesting part, but maybe a quick background to both of those. So ZoneCapture is our AP automation app. In essence, it adds OCR functionality to NetSuite. So the ability to send a PDF file to the system, have the data automatically captured, and auto create transactions based on the data. We started working on it in 2016. It's now our fastest growing app. We have over 800 customers using it. We started building it because there were quite a few separate AP tools on the market, but we felt that that wasn't really efficient. Like those integrations tend to be really complicated. If data isn't synced correctly, you immediately have incorrect transactions that you need to redo. So then you lose the time you won with OCR processes. We wanted something that was part of NetSuite, and that didn't exist. And that's what we started building with ZoneCapture. So these are some of the highlights of the app. So native Suite app supports purchase order matching. We add a split screen view to the system. A lot of emphasis on, you'll see that in the demo with all our apps, a lot of emphasis on user interface and making sure those processes are very easy and clear for the end users, and functionality for clickable auto learning. Basically, the ability to be able to set up logic in NetSuite and have that automatically run instead of having to manually make decisions every single time you book a purchase invoice. And then ZoneApproval, I also want to show you that one today. Development for that one really came also from conversations around ZoneCapture, is that a lot of customers asked us, okay, how does approval then work within ZoneCapture? And until recently, we would say, well, NetSuite has a fantastic workflow builder. You can use it to build your approval workflows. But we found that we got quite some pushback on that. And that mainly came from financial teams that said, hey, we don't have the knowledge or resources internally to build those and maintain those complex workflows. We want something simple. We kept hearing that so often, we thought, okay, let's build something for approvals. And when we're going to build it, let's extend it to also tackle some other pains or problems that we hear from time to time from customers using workflow functionality to build these approval workflows. So these are 5 of the main principles that we set out that we wanted to achieve with ZoneApproval. So we wanted it to be really easy to configure. So I'll show you that in a moment. We wanted approvals to be effortless. So have a clean, simple process in NetSuite. And also we put a lot of emphasis on approval by email because we felt that's really what customers want. And no matter if you have employees that have NetSuite users or not have NetSuite users, we want basically everyone to be able to approve transactions in an easy way using email functionality. We wanted to get rid of manual chasing. So you see, we introduced dashboards, email reminders. A pain that we heard a lot from customers was approval delegations, that they would set up approval logic and someone had to approve a transaction but was on vacation or out, and then there was no way to get that approved. And basically transactions got stuck, purchase orders couldn't be sent out, stock arrived late, all the drama that comes from that. We built in a very robust way to make that a lot easier. And especially for our larger customers that get audited, what we hear often is, hey, we always get asked to provide reporting on approval routing and why certain things were routed in a certain way. That's complex, and it is. So we came up with functionality to make that a lot easier. So I suggest we go ahead and let's leave the slides and let's start looking at that in action. So I'm switching over to my NetSuite dashboard, which you should now be seeing. In this account, I have all our applications installed, and you can hopefully see that straight away, right? When we get to our home dashboard, I can see the dashboard portlets that we add both for approvals and for scan and capture. And I want to walk you through a process where we see both of the applications in action. So imagine we're going to be processing a purchase invoice with ZoneCapture, and I want to make sure that when we do, that it gets rerouted for approval in the right way once that transaction has been created with ZoneCapture. So what I've done, because I know that I have butterfingers and I might click wrong buttons, I have already pre-prepared an approval matrix that we're going to use, but I do want to show you how easy that is to create from scratch. So what I do is I go to setup, and under setup you see there's lots of menu options for our different applications. One of them here is for zone approvals, and when I open that menu, there's a couple of different options here. You can always contact our dedicated support team straight from here. We have extensive knowledge base information. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new approval matrix to show you that in action. We come to this screen. And again, this has been designed to be simple and intuitive. I have to fill in some basic information. So I have to select what is the subsidiary on which I want to run this approval logic. It can be a single subsidiary. I can also select multiple subsidiaries if I want to do. Select all subsidiaries. Then a record type. So right now, we support the transactions that are also supported by the standard NetSuite approval flow. But we're going to enhance this. I'll show you that also at the end of the meeting. I will walk you through a couple of roadmap items. Our goal is towards the end of the year, we'll support virtually any transaction type, even custom transactions and custom records to run approval processes on. I select the currency because later on we're going to use some level of approvals that use amounts as well. So I need to know what's the context of those amounts. And then we have the principle of a hierarchy. So a hierarchy, you can create as many of those as you want. And if I select one, for example, the Zone and Co hierarchy, you see it loads in the number of levels of approvals that I want to select approvers for. In this case, 3, and you see that I've divided it up with higher than 500, higher than 1,000, higher than 10,000. Now, you can create this in any way, shape, or form that you need for your particular approval logic. So if I click on a different one, let's say this one, you see it loads in different levels of approval. Right now, we have an always approve option. The names are different. I have a CEO approval, so you can really set that up any way that you see fit. I can select a start date and an end date. End date can be handy, let's say, if you want to run certain approval logic temporarily, maybe during the holiday season, you might expect a lot of sales orders, so you want to maybe tweak the limits for approval. You can select that here. And we can say, when should we count an approval as overdue? So if you would say here, like 40, then after 40 hours of it being created, it will be marked as overdue, and then you can report on that separately if you wish to do so. Then here we can see our segments in NetSuite, and we can enhance that with any custom segments. And these we can use as our criteria for approval. Now also here, I do already want to point out that right now you can use segments and custom segments. But also this we're going to extend. So eventually you will be able to use any NetSuite field as a criteria in your approval logic. You also can see that we can use both header details and line details, right? So both of those are fully supported. All you would need to do is drag and drop in the criteria you want to use. So let's say department and location, and then I can start configuring out my approvers. So I could say, if the department is finance, if the location is London, then this person will always approve, this person will approve if it's higher than 500, etc., etc. I could tick it, and I would have configured my first approval criterion. Now, I do want to highlight this here because there's a few different options that we have for selecting approvers. So what I've just done is I've selected individual people, right? And this will be a list of all the employees in the system. So not users, but employees, because within our approval by email functionality, we can also let non-NetSuite users approve. We have a couple of different options here. You can see we can have sourced approvers. Now, both on a vendor and an employee level, what that means is this would be a person that you select, for example, on the vendor, like a default vendor approver. When you select this option, it will look at who is the vendor for this transaction and then take the person selected as the approver on that vendor record. Another thing that we recently added, which I'm quite excited about, is group approval. So you can see I can select a group here. And that's a NetSuite functionality. Like in NetSuite, you can create groups, and those groups can be either dynamic or static. If it's dynamic, it means that you can add a search there so that it changes. So you could make a search that says all people located in the London office, and as people leave and join, that will change. That group you can mark as available for zone approval. When you mark it, you will be able to also reroute approvals that will then go to that group. So anyone who's a member of that group would then be able to approve that transaction. So I have already prepared a simple matrix here. And what I've done is okay, if a bill comes in and the bill has as class furniture, then as soon as that's higher than 500, I want to look at it. I want to make sure I approve it. And in any other scenario, so any other class, if it's higher than 1,000, then I want to make sure that my colleague approves it. So let's go ahead and switch. And we have the first part of zone approvals done. So we can go ahead and we can go create this purchase invoice. So we're going to switch over to ZoneCapture, for which I have the portlet here. Now, I see here that I have a number of transactions waiting for me to be processed. So that came in. The way that works is that you can forward an inbox, or you can email an email to NetSuite. When that contains a PDF file, we will store that PDF file in NetSuite, and it's then going to be processed by our OCR engine. And for our OCR technology, we work with a third party. It's a company called Abby, and we specifically work with them because they always come up as a leader in OCR technology in like any type of research, the Magic Quadrants. They reach really high recognition rates, and they are super good in language recognition. So they support over 200 languages. That for us was really important because we know NetSuite is used by international businesses, and we wanted to make sure that wherever those bills are coming from, that our tool can handle it. So if I click on this incoming queue, it brings me to the heart of ZoneCapture. Let's give that a second to load. And this is our incoming queue. So here I can see all the transactions that are ready for me to process. And you might see, like I mentioned during one of those overviews, that UI experience is really important for us. So you can see that on a lot of the steps that we do, we build our own interfaces, as we did here. And we do that for a couple of reasons. Like it allows us to do things that are really difficult to achieve with just standard safe searches. So a couple of examples are here. You see like this nice PDF button. I can click it, then you get like a pop-up preview of your PDF file. It's easy to filter this out. Like another thing, I won't really show it because I don't have the full time to do so. But if multiple people work on this screen and someone starts processing a transaction here, it will immediately be blocked for other users to start processing. So it's real-time monitoring this, which is great. Like you really need that if you're working with a team on your AP processes. but that's impossible to achieve without building these interfaces. Another thing, you see that I've now filtered this out. Those filters can be saved on a user basis. It's really nice. So if I'm processing incoming purchase invoices for the UK, I just see those invoices. If I remove that, you see that immediately I can see the full list here. And another thing that I quite like in this interface is that if I scroll to the right, we do automated duplicate detection. So when a transaction comes in, our tool will actually say, hey, is there already a transaction in the system with the same transaction number? Or is there already a transaction in this list with the same transaction number? Was it maybe e-billed twice? If I click on that, I even get like a nice overview that shows me which one is duplicate. I could open that and see what's happening and if it's actually duplicate. But a lot of nice functionality to make the life easier for people using this to process those transactions. I'm gonna put it back on UK to keep things nice and clean. And let's go ahead and let's do some processing. So here I can see I have a status, and the status tells me, do I have all the information that I need to start processing this bill? The main things that we need is we need to understand the subsidiary and the supplier of the incoming transaction. Now, we do that automatically. So we use the captured data, and based on that, we find the right subsidiary and the right supplier. Another thing which I won't show in too much detail today, but I do want to point it out because we support it, and if it's of interest, reach out to me, and I'm happy to give a demo on that. But we support purchase order billing. So if we find a purchase order reference on the bill, we will connect that purchase order. You will then be performing a purchase order bill action. And there's a lot of additional functionality there around matching lines and making sure that we help the users in that. If that's of interest and you want to see that in action, give me a shout after the session. I also see if we're missing some information. So in this case, I can see, hey, matching is incomplete because we didn't find a supplier. So then I can always go in and open our booking recommendation record. I want to show you that. That booking recommendation record is split in three. You see I have the bill, the basic information captured, and the email that was used. I also want to show that to highlight that we have interactive screens. So because a vendor had not been found, you see the save and process option is not available here, right? As soon as I select the vendor, it immediately becomes available. And what's also pretty nice is that if the vendor does not exist at all, you could create it straight away from here. This always adheres to role setups in NetSuite. So if a user is using ZoneCapture but does not have access to vendor create, it won't be able to see that option and create a vendor. When you start creating a vendor, it's also a nice screen to highlight because you see that split screen functionality that we added to NetSuite can be used in multiple ways. So we use it on the bill, but also when you create a vendor, we utilize it so that it's really easy to compare the two. Like I could even map out information from the bill to the vendor. So it makes it super easy for me to create this entity if it doesn't exist yet. Now, luckily, I have one where everything was found and I can just go ahead and process it. So all I do is I hit the process button and then our bill create process starts. So what you see is it will start creating the bill. PDF on the left, transaction on the right, and all that information is auto-populated, right? So everything that we found on the transaction, like the invoice number, the amounts. Another really important thing here is our OCR provider supports line level recognition. So you see we have 3 lines here. Those lines have also been created here. There are a few different ways in which you can automate the coding of these lines. So if you look at the 2 lines here, those are driven by the default expense account on the supplier. If you look at the 3rd line, we utilize something called a matching rule. In essence, in a matching rule, you can say, hey, if I find a certain keyword or phrase on the description of the line, in this case, we found the word post, therefore the post matching rule has been applied. And then you can automate coding. So any field on the line of a transaction, most important, of course, the GL accounts, and you can say, hey, if we found the word post, select the freight and delivery account. But also any other field, any classification, anything that you might want to automate based on that description, you could configure. So instead of having to do and remember that yourself, you use auto learning functionality. And another thing I wanted to show you is you can also map information from the PDF to the transaction in NetSuite. So for a lot of values, that already happens automatically, right? Like the invoice number, the amounts, the dates, our tool will find those and map those. But if there's specific things, so here, for example, in the memo, we've mapped the reference. Then you can do that yourself within ZoneCapture. That's really easy. It's just a matter of selecting a field and drag and dropping a field on the bill, then it's parsed. And when you save this bill, it will then remember that mapping for the next time, and it will automatically repeat it. I'm going to select a location here because I have that as a mandatory field. And for those of you that were paying attention to the matrix that I've predefined, I'm going to select as my class furniture. I'm going to go ahead and save this bill. It will give me a warning around dates. I'm going to ignore that for now. And when this bill is now being saved, you will see an example of how these apps now start working together, right? Because we've created the bill with ZoneCapture. And I see that on this bill now a button pops up for submit for approval. Our approval app has a two-step approach here because we want the user to be able to first have a look at, is all the information booked correctly? Did I not forget to select my class? Luckily, I did not. And then I can hit submit for approval, and then it will be rerouted into the approval logic that we've selected. Now, when I hit that button, I want to also go to the dashboard, and while that is loading, explain a couple of things here. Mainly this portlet, because here we have our approval portlet, and there we can see anything that happens with transactions for us. Good to point. I won't show that during the demo today, but if you have a manager role, you will not only see this for yourself, but also for members in your team. I see that the bill now finished saving. So look, if I refresh the portlet, it automatically pops up here in pending approval. These are saved searches. So if you want to utilize this for setting it up as a reminder, or if you want to configure email alerts so that you get an email whenever there's a new transaction pending approval, or maybe weekly summaries, then you can extend those saved searches with standard NetSuite functionality to do just that. Now, going back to the bill, and I see some magic took place. I get a notification here that says, hey, approval is needed. And in this case, it tells me first it needs to go through level 1 of approval because the transaction is higher than 500. I can see I've been selected as the approver. Therefore, I also have a reject and an approve button available. By the way, this split screen, I can also turn it off. So if I just want to look at this transaction because now I'm going through approval and it annoys me, I always have the option to do so. More is happening because of this approval routing. So if I go to my zone approval tab here, and I go to my active approval log, you see that for every approval step that will be required on this transaction, we are already creating a log so that we can see what needs to happen with this transaction. Everything will be stored here. So I want to show you a couple of things there. So let's say that I'm just going to go ahead and approve this transaction. I could also reject it. Then it will ask me for a rejection reason. That reason you can also make mandatory for approval if you want people to always give a reason why they're approving. As a default, it's only mandatory for rejection. So when I hit approve, it will actually straight away approve that without needing to provide that. When I hit approve, and I give that a second to process, then that action, like a few things happen. Like I can see it's now been rerouted to the next person, to my colleague Barbara. And here on the log, I can see that mine is now marked green. I can see when I approved it. I can see how I approved it, in this case via user interface. It's even storing some stats around, hey, how long did it take? It will do that for each step. I'll show you that also later on when we look at reporting. There are more things that the app can do. Like I highlighted a few of those pain points in the beginning. There's a couple of things that I want to still show, and a nice way for me to show you that is by opening up my employee record, because there's some configurations happening there. So on the employee, I can also go to ZoneApprovals, and I want to mainly show two things here before I wrap. This is this approval delegation. So this is where I talked about if someone maybe, sorry, I still have a tiny bit of a cold. If someone maybe gets sick or goes on vacation, I could create an approval delegation record, and I could say Anastasia will be my approval delegate because I'm going on vacation from the 24th till 31st. What this would do is when I save that and the process runs, it will reroute my pending approvals to Anastasia. When new transactions need my approval, it will go to Anastasia. And when I come back from vacation, everything will be rerouted back to me. So a really easy way to deal with things getting stuck. One other option that we also have there, which I won't show today, but you can also mark someone a super approver. That means that you would give, for example, a system admin that access, then they could always overwrite an approval, even if they're not the person that is rerouted to. Now, keep in mind, all of that is always stored, right? So here you could always see, was it actually approved by a delegate or was it overruled by a super approver? All of that will always be visible on the logs. Another important one here is this approval by email functionality. So if I go back to my bill and I open up my email tab, by the way, guys, also just pointing out the obvious, on this bill, the PDF with which it was created is also automatically stored the same way that would always work, just under your files on the bill transactions. Under messages, I can see that 2 emails were sent. One to me when I had to approve, one to my colleague Barbara. So this is our approval by email functionality. It sends out an email template and it will attach transactions. And this is another example of where ZoneCapture and approvals work together. Because it was created by ZoneCapture, we know where can we find that bill PDF. So we attached that bill PDF to that approval email and the transaction printout, right? So that you can actually see how that transaction was booked. Now, we put a lot of time and effort into our approval by email functionality. So if I go, I'm just going to hover into our configuration here. You can create configuration records per subsidiary. So you can put slightly different logic in for each subsidiary, and it's quite handy. If I show you, for example, the French one, because here you have your approval by email setup. And there you can say, what are my approve and reject strings? So the way this works is you would reply to that email, and you would use as the first word in that email, you would use one of the approve or reject strings. So you could say approuver or rejecter, and then it would, when it finds that word, it would either approve or reject it. So you can do that per subsidiary so that you can use language-specific strings, and also that you can use specific email templates, right? Now, I don't want to spend a ton of time here in this configuration records. I just want to highlight 2 things that I think are really nice to know. Like you here, and a good thing to show is this lock behavior. So here you can configure, hey, do I want transaction to be locked once they're going through approval routing and afterwards as well? If you select that, you also still have the option to say, well, don't lock it for these users or these particular roles. And one of the things that I also absolutely still wanted to show you is this one. It's the unapproved transaction accrual. Might be slightly technical for some people. I try to keep it a little bit top level, but one of the things that NetSuite does, if I open up a different example here is that if a transaction is pending approval in NetSuite, it will not yet post into your GL. It will only do that once it's been approved. But when that goes over like a monthly close period, you actually do want to see the financial transaction of the financial impact of the transaction most of the time. So with this functionality, you can create accrual bookings automatically for transactions pending approval. Not just bills, by the way, that would also work the same for invoices, for example. What that does is if we have a transaction pending approval, like this one here for Asana, and I go to the ZoneApproval tab, you see that it created an accrual booking. That's our own specific transaction types. You can easily see what are the ones that were created by our application. And that would then create a booking where it counter books that transaction to an account that you've configured for that accrual booking. This will also be automatically reversed, right? There's logic you can set up for that during configuration. So you can say, should that happen immediately after approval, or are we just going to create and reverse these like a day before and a day after monthly close? But a lot of functionality in that area. And for like I worked with NetSuite as a financial user on the AP department. I would have pretty much just would have liked to have this app if only for this functionality. It saves tons of time. Final thing, also want to be wary of the time and have some time for questions still. I mentioned we have extensive reporting available on ZoneApprovals out of the box. So if I go to my approval menu, I can see here that I have something called an approval audit report that shows me all the transactions that were or that ran through our approval logic. If I click on any of those transactions, I'm just going to pick a random one. You get an overview of all the steps that took place during that approval. Yeah, this one doesn't have an enormous amount, but you get the gist of it, huh? Like who approved that transaction, when, how much time was spent in total on approval. So if the auditor asks you for that type of detail, you go to this report, you export it, and you're done. That's what I wanted to show. Before we dive into Q&A, I wanted to give a quick overview of what's up and coming. So all our applications are SaaS applications, meaning that we continuously push new functionality. We have around 4 to 6 new releases for all of our apps. If you look at Approval and ZoneCapture, they have dedicated development teams working on them. Lots of new functionality being introduced. I thought it was nice to highlight what's up next. So for ZoneApprovals, we're going to come with a bulk approval interface. So right now, you saw that I did that transaction by transaction, right? I just clicked the button there. We're going to introduce a really, really nice bulk approval interface. It will be one screen built with our own technology. It will show you all transactions that are pending approval, whether they are purchase orders or sales orders, so you don't have to go to different screens. It's all there, and you can take all your actions also from that screen. So you can mark these should be approved. You can put your notes there. Will really save a ton of time. Basically one screen, and within seconds you can approve all your transactions. We'll be introducing budget-based approval. So think of scenarios there that you would configure marketing budget, and you could utilize that in your approval logic. So you could say if the budget has been reached or exceeded, then we'll need an additional level of approval. And we'll continue working on the expansion of supported transactions. So keep an eye on our channels and our like sort of the release notes we post there, because with each release we'll be adding additional transaction types to be supported by ZoneApprovals. Then for ZoneCapture, we're putting a lot of focus this year in three-way matching. We're working on a completely new way to handle three-way matching. We're going to take that to the next level. We're expecting to, it's a big project, but we're expecting to launch that in the course of the year. And quite quickly, we're going to introduce instant processing. So when I now sort of explained the workflow of ZoneCapture, I talked about emailing that. We're going to be adding sort of drag and drop functionality to that. So you can just drag and drop a PDF in. That will automatically be processed for OCR, so you don't necessarily need to go through the email route. That was my content. I wanted to make sure there was still a little bit of time for a Q&A. So, Tony, do we have any questions from the audience?
We do. We have a couple actually. First question was, can people also approve transactions from the NetSuite Employee Center?
Yeah, no, good questions. Absolutely. So that's already a standard functionality in NetSuite that you can do that from Employee Center. That supports also the transactions that we route for approval. But we also take that into account for other developments we do. So, for example, this bulk approval interface that I talked about, we're very aware that we want to make sure that also is supported by that Employee Center functionality. Good question.
Okay. Another one here is the software compatible with SuiteApps?
ZoneCapture, I might, just because I always confuse which ones are and which ones aren't, so I might need to just double check it to make absolutely sure. But ZoneCapture is. But Tony, send me the details and let me just triple check it with a product expert after, yeah, so that I don't get it wrong. But as far as I know, it is.
Okay.
No, ZoneCapture is. We actually have customers using that with SuiteApps, so it is. Yeah.
It is. Okay, that's great.
Yes.
Another question, I thought this might arise. What's the cost of this functionality?
So we have two there. If you look at ZoneCapture, there is a subscription model, which is based on the number of documents you process. So it's really dependent on how much of those you're processing on a monthly basis. Starts in euros, top of my head, on like 60 euros a month. But best thing is to reach out to me and we can talk about what are your volumes and I can give you an exact price quotation. If you look at ZoneApprovals, that's a yearly license fee and that's priced at 2,400 euros a year. I think that's 2,000 British pounds, but I'm happy to confirm that also afterwards.
Okay, thanks. Another question here. If you have a supplier bill which requires different approvers according to the different lines on the bill, is this possible with ZoneApprovals?
Yeah, but you would need to utilize criteria that are available on that line level, right? So if those lines are, for example, you say this person needs to approve based on a classification or a department, then you can reroute that separately in that approval matrix and it can use line level functionality. So then it can absolutely reroute individual lines. Actually, what it does, it will loop through all those lines. It will sum them up. So it will say, how many lines do we have in total with that particular classification? And then reroute them to the relevant person that you configured in your matrix. So as long as you're able to do that based on those criteria on a line level, you can reroute it to multiple people.
Okay. Another question. Is there also the option to put a button in the email instead of replying?
Yeah, I get that question more often. It's not, but it's a deliberate choice. Like what we want to make sure of with approval by email is that the person who is marked as approver, that's the person who is now approving via email. And if you would use button logic, which we can obviously, but if you would do it and someone would forward that email to someone else and they would click that button, there's no way really for us to have verified that actually the approver approved it. That's why we use email replies, because then we are able to say, where is this email coming from? And is that the same email addresses that we have registered for that approver? So for that level of security, we did not implement button approval, but we use that email reply functionality.
Yeah, I understand that. And we have one final question at the moment. What is the OCR recognition rate of ZoneCapture?
Yeah, so Abby really gets very high recognition rates out of the box. So for common languages, I'll explain that, we get way over 90% recognition rate. But it is OCR technology. So there's always dependencies, right? It depends on, is the bill well structured? Like if it's a handwritten bill, yeah, then OCR will struggle with it, recognition rate will go down. Same with languages. So common languages, German, French, English, very high recognition rates. You will go over 90%. If you use less common languages, let's say Thai or Romanian or something like this, the starting recognition rate might be a little bit lower. It's good to know it can always be trained, so you can improve it, but you might not reach 95% immediately out of the box. Anything else, Tony, or does that? So I think all questions were covered. If not, like I shared my contact details, feel free to reach out to me if anything else comes to up. Also feel free. Oh, I think Tony's back.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had a technical glitch. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, no worries. Like I already started my wrap up, but then I'll give it to you. I'm sure you can do that much better than I can.
Yeah, no problem. Well, look, thanks, Jurian. Thanks for your very thought-provoking presentation, and thanks to everybody for joining the presentation this morning and for your excellent questions as well. We will be following up with all attendees via email with a recording of the webinar. But obviously, please feel free to reach out to your Eureka Solutions account manager if you have any further questions, or if you'd be interested in talking further with ZoneApproval. So thanks everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thanks Tony. Have a good day. Bye bye.